Good morning, Dr. Satish.
Good morning, sir.
I'll, in brief, in a minute's time, introduce you to this August gathering, sir, if you permit me.
Sir.
Thank you. भाई और बहनों, डॉक्टर सतीश जैन जयपुर से हैं। 1999 में आपने एमएस किया ईएनटी में एसएमएस मेडिकल कॉलेज से, और उसके बाद टाटा हॉस्पिटल और बॉम्बे के डॉक्टर देसाई हॉस्पिटल में ट्रेनिंग प्राप्त की। डॉक्टर कल्याणकर ने जब मुझे डॉक्टर सतीश जैन का बायोडाटा पढ़ने के लिए दिया, तो पढ़ने के बाद एक चीज मुझे नजर आई कि व्यक्ति पुरुषार्थ से कुछ प्राप्त करता है और प्रारब्ध से उसे कुछ प्राप्त होता है। पुरुषार्थ आप हम सभी करते हैं, प्रारब्ध जिसे हम कहते हैं गॉड गिफ्ट, वो ईश्वर देता है। डॉक्टर सतीश जैन में इन दोनों चीजों का बहुत सुंदर मिश्रण है। वो एक राष्ट्रीय और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ख्याति के आज गिफ्टेड सर्जन हैं, अगर मैं कहूं तो अतिशयोक्ति नहीं होगी। आज जयपुर में उनका एएनटी हॉस्पिटल भारत के प्राइवेट क्षेत्र में सबसे बड़ा और सबसे अल्ट्रा मॉडर्न हॉस्पिटल है, जहां मुझे बताया गया है कि 6 टेबल्स साइमल्टेनियसली एक साथ ऑपरेशन के लिए काम में लाई जाती हैं। अद्भुत क्षमता और विलक्षण प्रतिभा के धनी हैं डॉक्टर सतीश जैन, जिनके क्रेडिट पर, जिनके नाम पर 15 वर्षों के पीरियड में 70,000 ऑपरेशंस हैं। सर्जरी में अपनी विशिष्ट और नायाब शैली और कौशल्य से जाने माने डॉक्टर जैन को सिंगापुर के जनरल हॉस्पिटल में इंटरनेशनल लाइव वर्कशॉप के लिए फैकल्टी के रूप में निरंतर आमंत्रित किया जाता है। लिपिग्स यूनिवर्सिटी जर्मनी में लाइव स्कल बेस्ड सर्जरी के लिए डॉक्टर जैन को बुलाया गया था और बुलाया जाता रहता है, और वहां पर उन्हें ऑनररी मास्टर सर्जिकल एक्सपर्ट की मानद उपाधि से सम्मानित भी किया गया है। गेस्ट फैकल्टी के रूप में डॉक्टर जैन इंडोनेशिया, नेपाल, श्रीलंका, टर्की, दुबई और सार्क देशों के भ्रमण कर चुके हैं। देश के, भारत देश के हर प्रांत में, हर बड़े शहर में ईएनटी में आपने अपना हुनर दिखाया है। न्यूरो सर्जन्स को ट्रेनिंग देते हैं। अभी तक लगभग 15 लाइव वर्कशॉप उन्होंने आयोजित की है, 5 कॉन्फ्रेंसेस उन्होंने आयोजित की है, और उनका न्यूरो ऑटोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट देश के सर्वश्रेष्ठ डिपार्टमेंट में गिना जाता है, जहां पर कॉक्लियर, कोबाल्ट और लेजर सर्जरीज नियमित रूप से की जाती हैं। वैज्ञानिक और वैद्यकीय क्षेत्र में काम करते हुए डॉक्टर जैन को अपने सामाजिक ऋण का भी बराबर भान रहता है। आज तक वे लगभग 15,000 फ्री सर्जरीज कर चुके हैं, 5 लाख पेशेंट्स को अपने ट्रीटमेंट से फायदा पहुंचाया है, और जयपुर के भगवान महावीर विकलांग सहायता समिति के अंतर्गत लगभग 5 से 10,000 हियरिंग एड्स आपने वितरित किए हैं। डॉक्टर सतीश जैन का इतना परिचय देकर मैं डॉक्टर जैन से प्रार्थना करूंगा कि वे अपनी बात को आरंभ करें। डॉक्टर जैन सर।
Thank you very much, sir, for this elaborate introduction. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. First of all, my thanks and regards to Dr. Maruti for inviting me to this workshop. I know ever since he planned this workshop, he kept me calling and wanted to organize the best possible workshop in this region. He always told me that I want to give my delegate maximum possible, kindly advise me what do I do and how do I go about. And I'm sure that he has done all the arrangements perfect. I remember my last visit to Nanded, and that state conference which Maruti organized was the best ever state conference I ever attended. It was like a national conference, mini national conference. And thank you, Maruti, for everything. So, to begin with the scientific session which I am given is to start with the radiological anatomy of the paranasal sinuses. This workshop is centered on this endoscopic skull-based surgery, and to understand the endoscopic skull-based surgery, one needs to know in-depth details of the anatomy of the paranasal sinuses, the endoscopic anatomy of the paranasal sinuses. We know in last few decades, this endoscopic nasal surgery, which started with the basic functional endoscopic sinus surgery by Master Klinger, has developed, has grown by leaps and bounds, and over the last period of last 4 decades, the applications have extended, and every day the new application is added by means of doing by this endoscopic approach. And there are various reasons to it, and the most important is the development in the imaging modalities. More better understanding of the anatomy of the paranasal sinuses, which is basically the corridor to skull base for the endoscopic surgery. So to begin with, we need to know how to go about the radiological aspect, how to know the three-dimensional anatomy of the paranasal sinuses, which is very, very essential to understand. Reason being, the paranasal sinuses are surrounded by the critical structures from all around. The cranial cavity above and the orbits on both sides, and behind are the critical structures like optic nerve, carotid artery, and furthermore structures behind. So this understanding of three-dimensional anatomy of the paranasal sinuses on CT scan, which gives the best details of the anatomy here, is very, very important. As far as CT scan is concerned, for a basic sinus surgery, the coronal CT scan is considered to be sufficient, and it is very important for understanding the surgeon, as it gives the same anatomical understanding what we see through the endoscope. It gives the images in the same plane. So to begin with, I'll take you through how to read the CT scan coronal sections. Then we'll discuss the further details of the paranasal sinuses CT scans. So is it focused over here? Can you focus on this? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Mic.
Voice जा रही है उधर? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Is this picture focused?
Yes, sir. It's focused nicely.
Okay, so we are beginning with reading the coronal CT scans. Okay? Hello?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
So this is the first coronal. What is coronal picture? See, if you go back to this one. If you see this picture, if we take the slices in this plane, is the coronal plane. So we begin from anterior to posterior and see how we read the CT scan. So please focus on this one. So this is the first anterior most picture of this coronal cuts. Is it focused over there?
Yes, sir. It is focused.
So it is not the understanding the pathology or clarifying the extent of the disease which is more important. The most important thing on CT scan is to understand the anatomy, because this surgery, the endoscopic sinus surgery, the surgery of landmarks, we need to know the three-dimensional anatomy of the paranasal sinuses and then the extent of disease. So if we go through the first slice, what we see here, this is the soft tissue over the frontal bone. These are the nasal bones. This is the cartilaginous nasal septum, and these are the nasal ala. Is it clear? Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, it is clear.
Yeah. Now we move on to the next slide. See, the most important thing in CT scan, or if you order a CT scan to the patient, always ask for thin slice 1 mm sections, and if available in 3 dimensions, coronal, axial and sagittal, because certain anatomy is best seen on axial sections, or certain things are better seen on, certain information is better given on sagittal sections. So if we go on to the next slide, this is probably not 1 mm section, probably 2 mm sections. Reason being, if we have a 1 mm section, we can count each and every cell in the paranasal sinus labyrinth, and we can go by cell to cell, so we can have a full picture in our mind about the relationship of other the structures to each other. In the next section, see now, the frontal bone is coming into the picture. Can you see this?
Yes, sir. We can.
These are the nasal bones, and here is the glimpse of the
Bony
bony
septum.
part of the nasal septum. This is the bony part of the, or this is the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone, which forms the upper bony part of the septum. Now, moving further behind, we are going behind by 2 millimeters in each sections. Now see, this frontal bone is pneumatized over here. So this is how the frontal sinus is formed. This is the most anterior picture of the frontal sinus. We can see the sinus on this side and some septa which is separating the sinus of the other side. which is not very clear, and once we go behind we'll see everything better. Now below, again the nasal bones, this deviation of the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid, which is giving high deviation to the nasal septum, and you see the anterior nasal spine coming into the picture. Now going further behind, now see the well developed frontal sinuses. This patient has well developed frontal sinuses and there are multiple septa. Generally we see one septum separating the two sinuses, but there could be multiple septa. There could be multiple incomplete septa. These two septa which are seen on the anterior picture may not be there on the posterior picture. So we'll see, we'll follow this whether these are complete septa or not. So there are three pneumatized spaces in the frontal bone in this picture. Going down we can see the nasal bone and see this thickening. This is the frontal process of the maxilla coming into the picture. Okay. Now going further behind.
Hello.
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 Yeah.
Satish, hi, Ashish here.
Hi dear.
So now you better be careful, okay? What you're
Oh.
talking. Yeah.
Satish, good morning. Narayan also here.
Hi Narayan, good morning. सो गए थे रात को ट्रेन में? हेलो?
Yeah, we slept.
Yeah.
We didn't sleep together, but we slept. Okay.
Okay. So Ashish, I was taking the audience through the coronal CT images and how to read the coronal CT scan.
Yeah.
Most often we get the patient which is already having a coronal CT scan picture. Though I have already told or suggested,
Yeah.
once you order a CT scan to any patient, always order thin slice 0.5 to 1 mm in multi-planar or axial coronal sagittal images.
So earlier that.
Pardon? Hello? Hello?
Hello, Satish, sorry.
Yeah.
Earlier the teaching was 3 millimeter cuts. Now you are suggesting 0.5 to 1.
1. See, this paranasal sinus labyrinth consists of many cells. And if we have 1 mm scan, we can count each and every cell, we can follow each and every cell so that we can have a better understanding of relationship of each and every structure to each other. Okay? Now,
I think when you do the navigation, which you do only for tumors and all, that's when you need 0.5.
no, otherwise also we can get 0.5 mm sections.
Oh,
The
man.
CT has to be good. It's not like 2 slice, 4 slice CT scan which can give.
Okay.
It should be either 16 or 64 slices. We can fast cut the 0.5 mm sections.
Okay. Go ahead, please. Sorry.
Okay, moving on to the next picture. Now you see again the well developed frontal sinuses. There are 2 septa and this the full picture of the nasal bone. And these are the frontonasal processes. These are the frontonasal process of maxillary bone. Now this is the upper part of the nasal septum. There is a good significant deviation of the nasal septum and this is the maxilla coming into the picture. Moving further behind, see this is the frontal bone and this forms the floor of the frontal sinus. Okay, so as long as this floor is intact, we are moving behind. This is the frontal sinuses. Okay, now moving behind, see now again the floor is still intact. Why I am saying this? These frontal sinuses drain through the frontal recess, through the frontal ostium from behind. The ostium is always in the posterior most part. It's not in the anterior part. So as long as this floor is intact, what we see is the frontal sinuses. Okay. Now see the inferior turbinates coming into the picture. Hello?
Yes.
Now moving further behind. Now see the picture is changing a little bit. Still the floor is intact. See now the previous 2 septa, what we saw in the earlier images. Now there is only 1 septa here. So what can we infer from this? The septa which was seen in the anterior picture is not posteriorly. That means it was an incomplete septum. So this is the proper intersinus septum. Again there are 2 incomplete septa posteriorly which were not there in the previous images. Okay. So there are multiple septa, multiple incomplete septa, and one true intersinus septum. Okay?
Yes.
Now, moving further behind, we don't see any other cell in the picture, only the frontal sinuses, and the floor is still intact. Now, moving further behind, again see the well-developed frontal sinuses. See now the glimpse of the maxillary sinus coming into the picture. Can you see this?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
see that.
Yeah, and the inferior turbinate in picture. Now moving behind, but still the floor was intact.
Satish.
So, hello?
Yeah, Satish, if you have a sagittal scan, maybe you can just show the transition from the floor to the frontal recess.
Yeah, Maruti, I went through the images, but we don't have a sagittal picture.
Okay, then you correlate with the first pilot film that you have, the first picture that you showed.
First picture.
First, the pilot film.
Pardon?
Where you get cuts.
Pilot. Cuts.
Cut picture. First picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can show there what you're trying to show, the transition from the frontal floor to the frontal recess.
Yes. See, you can see here, this is the frontal sinus. Okay? We were going from front to behind. What we saw earlier was this frontal sinus, this wall, then the frontal sinus proper, nasal bones here. Now the rest of the sinuses are behind. We have reached until now here.
Yeah, that's what we want to
Yeah.
correlate.
So we haven't seen any sinus so far besides the frontal sinus. Okay? Now moving behind from this picture, you can see again this picture, the last picture we saw, the glimpse of the maxillary sinus coming into the picture. Now moving to the next picture, now you see the change in the picture, but still the floor is intact. But now there are two cells, this is the small one and this is quite well developed. These cells below the frontal sinus in the anterior cuts, this is frontonasal process. So this cannot be anything else than Agarnase cell. Agarnase are the most anterior cells. Agarnase are basically ethmoidal cells which pneumatize the lacrimal bone. So lacrimal bone is anterior in relation to the frontonasal process and they lie in the relationship of the frontal recess, anterior relation of the frontal recess. We haven't seen the frontal recess so far. So this should be the Agarnase cell. These are almost always present. Now moving further behind.
Hello, Dr. Satish.
Hello.
Dr. Devri
Now
here.
the frontal
Hello.
floor has gone. Can you see this?
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Just one question for a
Yeah,
prior
ऊपर से
picture.
आवाज नहीं आ रही है, तेज करो ना.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a question about prior picture.
Yeah.
Is there any relation between interfrontal septum and perpendicular plate,
Perpendicular plate.
bony plate? Are they in
Yeah,
the
they
same
are
direction?
almost always in the same line. You can see here. This is the intersinus septum you are talking about, and
Yeah.
this is the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid. This is ethmoidal bone, the part of the ethmoid bone, this is part of the frontal bone.
Yeah.
But they are always in the same plane.
Okay.
And you can see in all the sections, they are always in the same plane.
Yeah.
Now, the next picture, there are more structures coming into the view. These are the two well-developed Agarnase cells you can see. And see the glimpse of the middle turbinate coming into the picture on this side. Probably this is also the middle turbinate. And this is the nasolacrimal
Duct.
system. Can you see on both sides?
Yes.
So, nasolacrimal system again is very anterior. And in relation to the nasolacrimal system, which is so anterior, these are the Agarnase cells. They cannot be anything else than Agarnase cells. But now see the floor of the sinuses is almost disappeared. So if you move to the next picture, see, all of a sudden, these spaces looking like the frontal sinus, but there is no floor now. So we have reached the most posterior part, which is continuous inferiorly. So this is proper frontal recess. Okay?
Yes.
This is no more frontal sinus now. This is frontal recess now, which is continuous inferiorly. Now we see the middle turbinate, the first part of the middle turbinate, very clear in this picture. The first part of the middle turbinate is lying in the sagittal plane. The middle turbinate has three parts, and all three parts are lying in a different plane, which contributes to its stability, which is very, very essential. I'll tell you the regions when you go behind further. So this is the first part of the middle turbinate, and see where it is attached to. This is the crista galli, this is the cribriform plate, And this first part of the middle turbinate is attached to the cribriform plate. At the junction of, this is the horizontal plate and this is the lateral plate,
Yes.
lateral lamella. So these two, the first part of the middle turbinates are attached to the cribriform plate at the junction of horizontal and lateral lamella. And this is the beginning of the frontal recess. And see, if you go back to the previous picture, these are the well-developed Agarneji cells, and just behind the Agarneji, see the Agarneji is disappearing now. The nasolacrimal duct is in picture, and the frontal recess coming into the picture. So frontal recess is just behind the Agarneji cell. This is very, very important understanding, and we'll see in the live surgical session how Agarneji covers the frontal recess. Frontal recess is not a duct, it's not frontonasal duct, it's a recess, and the final shape of the recess is decided by the surrounding structures. And the most important relation is the Agarneji, which is always anterior to it. So in live surgical session we'll see, once we remove the Agarneji, the frontal recess will be uncovered. This is the simplest anatomy which we can expect in a patient while surgery. A single Agarneji on both sides, and directly behind the Agarneji are the frontal recess. So once we go behind the Agarneji and fracture it anteriorly, we'll uncover the frontal recess directly. Okay? Hello?
Yes, yes, sir.
Now, moving behind, now see the more structures coming into the view. Now see the maxillary sinuses are looking the full picture of the maxillary sinuses you can see. The uncinate process you can see arising here and attached to the inferior turbinate. Can you see the uncinate process?
Yes, on both,
Both sides?
Yes.
These are the middle turbinates, both middle turbinates, and see the lamella of the middle turbinate which is pneumatized on both sides.
Yes.
So this is termed as concha bullosa, pneumatized middle turbinate. Now another structure, this is the uncinate process, and see now this cell, this is attached to the lamina papyracea here. This well developed cell attached to the lamina papyracea, and this is the bulla ethmoidalis. This is the largest of the anterior ethmoidal cells which we see. So you can see the uncinate, bulla ethmoidalis. In between these is the hiatus semilunaris inferioris, and this is a two-dimensional cleft which opens laterally in a three-dimensional space, which is not very clear here. That is infundibulum. I'll show in the other pictures through my presentation how the infundibulum is seen by the other axial and the sagittal sections. So this infundibulum and this anatomy is best seen on axial and sagittal sections. But we can appreciate here the hiatus semilunaris inferioris between the uncinate and the bulla ethmoidalis. And this is frontal recess. Now the difference is, if you are given this kind of a CT scan, this picture only, what will you term this as? Frontal sinus? This is not frontal sinus now. Frontal sinuses are disappeared. We have left the frontal sinuses anteriorly, but these two pneumatized cells are looking like frontal sinuses. So how to differentiate? If you go back to the previous picture, can you go back here? See the frontal sinuses. Okay? Now the difference is, as long as the floor is intact, it is frontal sinus. Once the floor is gone, this cannot be frontal sinus. This is a cell behind the frontal sinus now. And going above the orbit, you can see how it is pneumatizing this orbital process of the frontal bone, sometimes up to the zygomatic bone. So this is supraorbital cell, which is posterior to frontal sinus. Okay?
Yes.
So once you see this kind of pneumatization in a section which is posterior, if you are given only this single section, then how will you decide that whether it is anterior or posterior section? The presence of maxillary sinus. If you see in the same section developed maxillary sinus and two frontal sinus kind of things, it cannot be frontal sinus. Then if this section is far posterior and it cannot be frontal sinus, it is always supraorbital cell. Is it clear, sir?
Yes.
So now moving further behind, Ashish, sleeping?
Yeah, Satish. Yeah,
Sleeping?
I'm listening, Baba.
So now going further behind, Ashish, you can interrupt me by your comments anytime.
Only if you make a mistake, please make one.
So now, if you go further behind, you can see the cribriform plate coming into the picture, well developed olfactory fossa, the crista galli, and two olfactory fossa on either side of the crista galli. This is horizontal lamella and this is lateral lamella, very, very clear. This is the bulla ethmoidalis. So this is the posterior part of the anterior ethmoid, you can say. We are still in the going through the anterior ethmoid because we can see the roof of the anterior ethmoid over here. Now, if you go behind, now see the changes. If you come to this picture, there are more cells coming into the picture, more structures coming into the picture. Again, the cribriform plate, same. The bulla ethmoidalis, the uncinate process, and see one more cell here at the level of the infundibulum. This is infraorbital cell. Again, this is ethmoidal cell, but the infraorbital ethmoidal cell, this is known as Heller cell. Again, the flat Heller, long flat Heller cell on this side. So the importance of this Heller cell is this narrows the outflow of the maxillary sinus. So this contributes to the obstruction if it is present. So one should consider, one should make or prepare his mind while going through the CT scan that he is going to come across the Heller cell. And this cell, once you see through the endoscope, this septa will be closed and sometimes you don't realize and you open a very narrow opening or of the maxillary ostia that can stenose. The CT will guide you whether this is the lamina papricia or the Heller cell, and one should remove this septa between the cell and the maxillary sinus and drain this cell in the maxillary sinus itself, and that's how you widen this outflow of the maxillary sinus. Now, so in this picture you can see both sides the Heller cell compromising the outflow of the maxillary sinus. Now, going further behind, okay, one more thing, I'll take you back to the previous picture, the uncinate process. Can you come back to this? See, can you see this uncinate process?
Yes.
This uncinate, understanding of the uncinate insertion is very, very important to understand the frontal outflow. Whether the outflow is draining medially or laterally. The upper insertion of the uncinate is variable. The lower insertion is always same on the inferior turbinate, and if it is going further posteriorly to the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid. But the upper insertion is variable, and this is determined by the development of Agar-Nagy cell. See how this uncinate is going. Why I am taking you to this picture. This uncinate is going. Agar-Nagy was seen in the previous picture as well, but uncinate was not seen. Uncinate is seen in the picture, the posterior picture. So this forms the posterior-medial relationship of the Agar-Nagy and then inserts on the lamina papricia. Sometimes the Agar-Nagy is too developed, too big, that pushes the uncinate medially. And then this uncinate inserts either on the middle turbinate or sometimes on the skull base. And this is very, very important to understand, because if this uncinate is inserting medially on the turbinate of the skull base, then this frontal outflow will drain in the infundibulum itself. Then there will be a common outflow of the maxillary and the frontal, and very commonly you will see the coexistent frontal and maxillary sinusitis. If this uncinate turns laterally and insert on the lamina papricia, which is the most common situation, over 90% of the times the uncinate inserts on the lamina papricia, and in that situation the frontal outflow is medial in the middle meatus. Okay. Now we come back to the posterior picture now. Is it focused? Hello?
Is. Yes.
Yeah. So we were seeing in the last picture the Heller cell. Again we see the Heller cell in picture, and now see there are other important relations as we go posterior. We were in the posterior part of the frontal recess, and what we see this conical change in the orbit over here. Can you notice this?
Yes, yes.
This is the point where the anterior ethmoidal artery leaves the orbit. Now you see in the next picture very, very clear the anterior ethmoidal artery leaving the orbit, and this is the location which one must pick up, and this is the classical location. If you look into the orbit, see this is the optic now. This is the medial rectus,
Yeah.
superior rectus, inferior rectus, lateral rectus, and just above the medial rectus is the superior oblique muscle. See the close relationship of the superior oblique and medial rectus. it is at this site of confluence of the superior oblique and the medial rectus, this anterethmoidal artery leaves the orbit. Is it clear?
Yes.
So it leaves the orbit here and traverses through the roof of the ethmoid and then enters the olfactory fossa by piercing the lateral lamella of the cribriform plate. Can you see this?
Yes.
So, how the anterethmoidal artery goes from here, the first compartment is the orbit, then it leaves the orbit, the second compartment is the roof of the ethmoid,
Yeah.
and the third compartment is the intracranial part, which it passes through the olfactory fossa. Though I'll show on the other my presentation, this artery, once it enters the olfactory fossa, it runs anteriorly. It runs anteriorly on the olfactory floor of the olfactory fossa, makes a sulcus, the ethmoidal sulcus, and gives off a branch, anterior falcine artery, to the falx cerebri. And then it comes back in the upper part of the nasal cavity, which is the fourth compartment, again extracranial. So intraorbital, extracranial, intracranial, then again extracranial, and supplies the anterior superior part of the nasal cavity. Then from here, after supplying the anterior superior part of the nasal cavity, it again leaves the nasal cavity and come on the outside dorsum of the nose, underneath the nasal bone, and supply the dorsum of the nose. So it traverses various compartments, and this can be picked up on axial scans as well, coronal as well. We'll see on the axial if we have. So now, this is the level of, once you see the anterethmoidal artery, this is the level of the basal lamella. Once you go behind in the further CT scans, you will see the posterior ethmoid coming into the picture. So this is the location of the anterethmoidal artery. During live surgery, we will correlate this with the basal lamella. See now, this is the middle turbinate. Can you see this?
Yes.
Middle turbinate. Now you see in the next picture, the middle turbinate is turning laterally. Can you see this?
Yes. Yes.
So this is the level of the ground lamella or basal lamella. Here the middle turbinate, this is the second part of the middle turbinate. The first part, which was lying in the sagittal plane, is now turning laterally and inserting onto the lamina papyracea. So this second part is now lying in the coronal plane. So all these structures which we saw in the ethmoid, anterior to the ground lamella, were all the parts of
Anterior ethmoid.
anterior ethmoid. This ground lamella demarcates the anterior from the posterior ethmoid, not only anatomically but functionally as well, as all these cells anterior to the ground lamella drain anteriorly in the middle meatus, while the cells behind, or the sinuses behind the ground lamella, which we are going to see, all drain behind the basal lamella. So this is an importance from the clinical point of view, as if your patient has a disease limited to the anterior ethmoids, we don't need to clear the posterior ethmoid and the sphenoid if it is perfectly limited to the anterior part of the sinuses, because the posterior group of sinuses have their different drainage. Now, in this section we have some more anatomical relationships. If we see in the nasal cavity, this is the inferior turbinate, the middle turbinate which is turning laterally. This defect, can you see this in the medial wall of the maxilla?
Yes.
Is the fontanelle. Since it is behind the uncinate process, this is the posterior fontanelle. Can you see this?
Yes.
And this bone inserting to the orbit, this is the perpendicular plate of the palatine bone, inserting to the orbit through the orbital process. This is the orbital process. Okay?
Yes.
Now, moving behind. Now, as I said, once we cross the ground lamella from anterior, we are going from anterior to posterior. After the ground lamella is going to be the posterior ethmoids. Now see the change. While changing from anterior to posterior ethmoids, there are several changes you will notice on a CT scan. And 4 or 5 major changes I will take you through. Number 1, the size of the orbit. Size of the orbit. You saw the orbit, the full circumference of the orbit here. Now as we enter the posterior ethmoid and go behind, can you follow me? मेरे साथ साथ चलना इधर. चलो. You follow me, the size of the orbit in the posterior sections. Are you following me?
Yes, more square.
See, becoming is more and more smaller. So this is one change. Once you see the post-ethmoid, the beginning of the post-ethmoid, you will see several changes. Number one was the orbit. It is becoming smaller and smaller in size. Second is the change in the maxillary sinus. We saw in the antiethmoid, see the globular shape of the maxillary sinus. Now, as we go in the post-ethmoid and go further behind, follow me. You follow me, please. See this? It is becoming more and more oval.
Well, oval. Yeah.
So this is the posterior part of the maxillary sinus. If you are given a single scan, you can correlate by all these means whether this is a section of the anterethmoid or posterethmoid or exactly what level you are seeing. Okay. Now the third important change is the skull base. We have seen the cribriform plate with the medial and lateral lamella, and this cribriform we can see is a very thin plate of bone. Now once we enter the posterethmoid, now see the change. Follow me please again. See the flatter roof of the posterethmoid. Can you see?
Yes.
Going further behind, flatter and thicker. Can you see?
Yes, yes.
And see more thicker here. And important anatomy, the section is right through the posterethmoidal artery. Can you see this? The posterethmoidal artery leaving the orbit over here. Most often you don't see the posterethmoidal artery as the roof of the posterethmoid is very thick as compared to anterethmoid, and this artery traverses through the bone only, and you don't pick up on a CT scan or during live surgery. It's uncommon to see this artery so prominent underneath the skull base. Can you see this posterethmoidal artery?
So we can see more clear on right but not on left.
Yes, it's more clear on the right side, but you can see the you can demarcate the ethmoidal artery on the left as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, so this is another change. Now the next thing is cells. We have seen the smaller number of cells in the anterethmoids. Now, if we go in the posterethmoids, you see the larger cell. Can you see this? Larger and fewer cells. See these large cells, which are less in number, but size is bigger than the anterethmoidal cells. So these are posterethmoid cells.
Posterethmoids.
Okay. So these 4 or 5 changes are important to differentiate the anterior from the posterethmoids. Okay, so we were here. Now we go to the next picture in the posterethmoid. Again, this is the roof of the posterethmoid. Now in the nasal cavity, what we see here, the inferior turbinate is here. See the middle turbinate, where it is inserted here. On the
Posterior wall of maxilla.
on the medial wall of maxilla, and this is formed by the perpendicular plate of the
Ethmoid.
palatine bone. Okay. And once you see the maxillary, the middle turbinate inserting over here, this is the third part of the middle turbinate now. This is going straight behind, see straight in the axial plane. So this third part of the middle turbinate, which is going behind and it finally inserts on the roof of the choana or ends on the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid, but it lies in a axial plane. We'll correlate the same thing in the live surgical session as well. Now, another important thing, the beginning of the posterethmoid is marked by the superior turbinate. Can you see here? Hello?
Yes, left side we can see.
Yeah, you can see the superior turbinate on both sides.
Okay.
You can see better on this picture, superior turbinate on both sides,
yes.
forming the medial wall of the posterethmoid. So this again is a very, very important anatomy, and we'll correlate in the live surgical session as well. Why important? This marks the beginning of the posterethmoid. So while operating, moment you enter the ground lamella, look medially for the superior turbinate. The moment posterethmoid starts, the superior turbinate starts, and this goes all along the entire medial wall of the posterethmoid. So this is very, very important. The moment you enter the posterethmoid, you will see the middle superior turbinate medially, and this inserts on this thick bone of the posterethmoidal roof.
Square.
Okay?
Yes.
So this is again a difference from the middle turbinate. Middle turbinate inserts on a very thin bone. That's why handling of the middle turbinate has to be very, very careful, as any forceful handling or pull on the middle turbinate can lead to a distant fracture at the level of the cribriform plate. But since this part of the roof of the posterior ethmoid is very thick, you can even pull or cut the superior turbinate, and yet you won't see the CSF leak, as the roof of the ethmoid is relatively thicker. Okay? Now,
Yes.
at this point, one more important relationship. We are going posteriorly. Now we are going to go behind the maxillary sinus as well. And you see on the posterolateral aspect of the maxillary sinus, what is this opening leading to the orbit? This is
Maxillary.
inferior orbital fissure.
There is.
Okay? Leads to inferior infraorbital nerves and vessels.
Yes.
Okay? Now, moving further posteriorly. Still I am saying it as a posterior ethmoid. Why not the sphenoid sinuses? This is
Mag-
still posterior ethmoid. The reason being, as long as you see the posterior ethmoid, you will see the complete nasal septum. Can you see this?
Yes.
Complete nasal septum. Nasal septum complete. These are large ethmoidal cells, inferior turbinate, middle turbinate, and superior turbinate. The moment you enter the sphenoid, you won't see the
Complete septum.
complete septum. You will see the rostrum of the sphenoid here and the choana below. We'll see this in the next sections. So, as long as we see the complete septum, all these are posterior ethmoidal cells. Okay?
Yes.
All these are posterior ethmoidal cells. Now you see in the next picture. Can you see this picture?
Yes.
Now the septum is gone. See now. Okay, go back to the previous picture. The nasal septum. Can you see this nasal septum?
Complete. Yes.
Complete nasal septum.
Yes.
Now see what has changed. You can see the posterior most part of the turbinates.
Yes.
Nasal, there is no more nasal septum. This is intersphenoid septum,
Yes.
and this is the beginning of the choana over here. This is the last part of the nasal septum
Yes.
and the beginning of the choana. And see this last part of the orbit. Can you see this?
Yes.
This is superior orbital fissure, you can say,
Yes.
through which lot of nerves and vessels enter the orbit. So this is the last part in superior orbital fissure. This communicates posteriorly to the cavernous sinus, and this is a lot of people consider is as a anterior continuation of the cavernous sinus, because this leads posteriorly to cavernous sinus. Now moving further behind, you can see the choana now very clear,
Yes.
the intersphenoid septum, and lots of other structures coming into the picture. Now see, in the lateral wall, this protrusion is formed by the carotid artery.
Yes.
Superiorly, these are two depressions or openings, you can see. Hello?
Ah, Satish, yeah.
Yes. Are you getting the picture?
Yeah, we are getting very good pitch.
So we were at the sphenoid, huh?
Yeah,
So this was the last picture which we were discussing.
yeah.
The both sphenoid sinuses, intersphenoid septum. Laterally, in the lateral wall, the prominence of carotid artery. Superiorly,
Yeah.
this depression belongs to the optic nerve,
Yeah,
and in between this is the clinoid process, anterior clinoid process,
yeah,
and this is known as the opticocarotid recess. See, in this case, this is not very well pneumatized. Sometimes the sphenoid is over pneumatized, and you can see the pneumatization of this recess. In that situation, just behind the recess is the carotid artery. This belongs to basically optic strut. Now,
okay.
Besides
Satish,
this-
sorry, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'll, since we have a little bit time, just point out the carotid, and from the anterior wall of the, we tend to widen the sphenoid ostium.
yeah.
So the anterior wall, so how far away and laterally, how much laterally when one goes, is, if at all, is the carotid at risk?
Okay.
Yeah.
See, Ashish, the average depth of the sphenoid sinus
Yeah,
is 17 millimeter.
okay,
It may vary from
Yeah.
patient to patient,
yeah,
but the average depth is 17 millimeter.
yeah,
And sphenoid lies in the posterior wall, posteriorly
yeah,
and laterally. And now the portion of the carotid,
yeah,
which is exposed, if we get the exposed carotid, is the cavernous portion, the anterior band of the carotid. See, the cavernous carotid has two bands. The carotid, once it comes out of the horizontal petrous carotid, once it comes out of the foramen lacerum, it becomes vertical on either side. That
Yeah.
is known as paraclival carotid. That is basically cavernous carotid, vertical cavernous carotid. But that is relatively posterior. Okay?
Yeah.
Then it comes anterior and makes a band, that is posterior band of the carotid. Then it comes anterior horizontally, that is the horizontal portion, and then it again turns anteriorly, that is anterior band. So the part of the carotid which we see lateral to the sella is basically the anterior band of the carotid.
Yeah.
And then it further continues as clival segment and then intracranial segment. So the part of the carotid which is most often, if we get dehiscent, is the anterior band of the cavernous carotid,
So get your mic little bit earlier.
which is
Your audio was
lateral to the sella.
good.
Is it? Are you clear about this?
Yeah, your audio is not so good. It could be better. Earlier it was better. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. Now okay.
Can you hear me now? Clear?
Yeah. Better.
Okay. So the anterior band of the cavernous carotid is exposed. If it is exposed, that is the portion which is most often exposed, and that is the thinnest part of the, or the thinnest bone over the carotid in the sphenoid sinus. So, but that part is lateral to the sella on both sides.
Acha, hello. Can you please answer me simple? Yes, anterior wall of the sphenoid. When you start widening it laterally,
Yeah.
is there a risk to the carotid?
No, as long as you stick to the anterior wall. there's no
Anterior
risk.
wall. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as I
Right.
told you, the average depth of the sphenoid sinus is 17 millimeter.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
And
Thanks,
see,
thanks,
most
yeah.
often carotid is damaged not when it is dehiscent.
Yeah.
It is often damaged when you do some instrumentation or
Blind.
sharp instrumentation within the sphenoid sinus
Yeah.
without realizing where you are working, particularly pulling out the septa or pulling out some lesion or some
Working
tumor
in
or
the
whatever.
sphenoid sinus, not
Hmm?
at the when you are working in the sphenoid sinus,
Yes.
not when you are widening the sphenoid.
not at
ostium.
all.
Yeah.
Not
perfect.
at all.
Yeah, that's
Not at
what.
all.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. So now this is the sphenoid sinus. So now there are lot of pictures, lot of anatomy which is visible in this picture. If you see all these bones, whatever you are seeing in this picture, all belong to the parts of the sphenoid bone.
Yeah.
See, in the previous sections, you saw various bones. There are lots of bones in relation to the nasal cavity and paranasal sinuses. But in this picture, this entire picture, the entire bony anatomy belongs to the sphenoid sinus. There is no other bone. Okay?
Yeah.
See what is there? This is the body of the sphenoid. Then it has two wings. The lesser wing, which is not completely visible. This anterior clinoid is a part of the lesser wing. Then this is the greater wing of sphenoid. Can you see this?
Yeah.
This is greater wing of sphenoid. These are two processes extending inferiorly, pterygoid processes, and from these processes are these two plates, the medial and lateral pterygoid plates. This is the body of the pterygoid process. And see, there are two canals which are visible in the body of the pterygoid process in the floor of the sphenoid. The medial one is the Vedian canal,
Yeah.
and the lateral one is the V2, foramen rotundum. It leads to the maxillary nerve. So once this part of the pterygoid process is not pneumatized, like in this patient, these two canals are seen separately with the non-pneumatized bone in between.
Hand is coming in the way. Yeah, I think
Okay,
hold
okay,
the
sorry.
pointer. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Sure.
thanks. Yeah.
So you see this part of the pterygoid process is not pneumatized, and you can see both the canals.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes this pneumatization of the sphenoid extends into the pterygoid as well, pterygoid process. Then you see in between these two canals, that is the lateral, that forms the lateral recess of the sphenoid. Like if you remember, the Arvind had a case of CSF leak from the lateral recess of a sphenoid.
Correct. Yeah.
In that situation, the best way to deal with that area or to expose that area is to go trans-pterygoid.
Yes.
Drill the pterygoid process and then expose the complete lateral recess and repair the defect. So this is pterygoid process. This is the rostrum of the sphenoid, and this is the body of the sphenoid, these two canals. Now,
Satish.
if we go, yeah,
There's a good picture to show how the medial pterygoid plates, they actually form the lateral wall of the coena. That's a big
lateral wall of the coina. Yes, yes, Narayan. That's very important. This medial pterygoid plate forms the lateral wall of the posterior most part of the nasal cavity as well as coina. And this has a tremendous significance in skull base surgery, as now by knowing the anatomy of this region, you can access the parapharyngeal space and the infratemporal fossa endoscopically very easily. Drill the pterygoid, this medial pterygoid plate, you will be right in the infratemporal fossa. In between these two plates is the pterygoid muscle, and just behind is the parapharyngeal space and the eustachian tube. So once we drill this medial pterygoid plate, you come across the eustachian tube and the infratemporal fossa muscle. Cut the eustachian tube, you will be in the parapharyngeal space, exposing the parapharyngeal carotid artery. So Narayan, it was a good point to know that this forms the lateral wall of the coina and the posterior most part of the nasal cavity. Now moving further behind, again you can see the Vedian canal. This is the for V2. Vedian runs in the floor of the sinus at the junction with the this pterygoid process with the body of the sphenoid. This is a very important landmark in skull base surgery, as this Vedian canal leads to the Vedian nerve, which comes from the foramen lacerum behind at the level of the carotid artery. So if you in the skull base surgery, sometimes if you don't find the carotid artery, just follow the Vedian canal, that will lead posteriorly right up to the foramen lacerum from where the carotid emerges. So that's a very, very important landmark. Now if you go further behind laterally, though we don't have the further sections, otherwise you will see laterally another canal, the mandibular canal or the foramen ovale, that is far lateral. So all these three branches of the trigeminal nerve diverges after exiting the Michel's cave. The V1 goes superiorly in the superior orbital fissure, superiorly, then V2 comes here, V1 goes superiorly, V2 goes from the foramen rotundum, and from here these two V2 and median run anteriorly and open in the pterygopalatine fossa anteriorly, and V3 goes further laterally and then exit the cranial cavity and come in the infratemporal fossa. So that's how this coronal CT scan is read. So this was basic understanding of the coronal CT scan. But
one more small
in
point.
endoscopic sinus surgery or in the skull base surgery, we need to know the other how to read the other axial and the sagittal section and the significance of those.
Satish,
Yeah.
one small point in the last 2-3 cuts which you made, you can probably show them.
Narayan, can you bring your mic closer or speak a bit loudly?
In the
आवाज नहीं आ रही उधर से, करो मत ये।
in the last 2-3 cuts,
Yeah.
like you spoke about Vedian nerve, being a landmark for the carotid. Can you
Yeah.
just elaborate that, and eustachian tube, how it also is a landmark for the carotid?
Carotid?
Yeah, for the
See.
internal carotid.
Yeah. See, Narayan, this Vedian nerve opens in the pterygopalatine fossa anteriorly, and it opens like a funnel shaped opening. Then it runs directly posteriorly in the floor of the sphenoid.
Satish,
Yeah.
I prefer you showing it on the scan so that people understand. I know that anatomy. I just wanted you to show it on the scan. How the bends, the Vedian artery and Vedian nerve and the eustachian tube. Yeah, just show them how it is related to the carotid, how the segments of the carotid would run.
This on the CT scan.
Yeah, on a CT scan, just roughly.
Yes, you can see on the CT scan, Narayan. I told you this is the prominence of the carotid artery in the lateral wall of the sphenoid.
Exactly.
You can see that.
Yeah.
And see there in the floor the Vedian going.
Yeah.
This Vedian, the inclination of Vedian from anterior to posterior is little lateral. As it goes behind, it runs little lateral, and the movement when it comes close to the carotid, it actually crosses the carotid. See where it goes to the carotid at the level of the foramen lacerum, where the horizontal petrous segment of the carotid becomes the vertical cavernous. So at that horizontal segment becomes vertical, this crosses the band of the carotid. So on CT you can make out this runs in the floor of the sphenoid. I told you at the junction of this pterygoid process in the floor of the sphenoid, and then runs little laterally, and laterally you can see the carotid artery in the immediate lateral relation of the sphenoid posteriorly. So once it travels posteriorly, it goes directly towards the carotid. Sometimes the sphenoid is not very pneumatized. You are doing some skull based procedure and you really don't know where exactly the carotid is. You need to have a navigation system in that situation. You need to have a Doppler, or otherwise you follow the VDN. This is an excellent landmark to follow the carotid. Naren, you wanted to say something else?
No. You've done a great job. I was just trying to make the point that Vidian is the junction of cavernous and petrous part, and the eustachian tube is the junction of the petrous and the parapharyngeal segment. That's what I just wanted to make a point.
Yes. So actually, at the point where when it reaches the foramen lacerum, where this Vidian nerve is formed, it actually crosses that band of the carotid artery. It crosses the horizontal segment of the petrous carotid, where it becomes vertical.
Yes, Satish.
The case is induced,
Yeah.
and I think it will take 10-15 minutes more
Okay.
for the instruments and everything to be lined up. So do I go through some more CT scans?
Yeah, you can do that.
I will show some variations in the anatomy
Yeah,
through
you can
my
do that.
PowerPoint presentation. Can somebody connect the laptop? Narayan,
Yeah.
are you getting the PowerPoint picture?
Getting a picture. Yeah.
Getting?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll go through this presentation quickly until the case starts. So basically we have seen the coronal CT scans, but we need to have, as I mentioned in the beginning, the axial and sagittal as well in an ideal situation. Why? The axial gives some information better than coronal regarding some anatomy like nasopharynx. If you see on this axial, you'll see the details of the nasopharynx better than the axial sections. You can see the eustachian tube. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, you can see the eustachian tube orifice, torus tuberis, and the fossa of Rosenmuller. This is the inferior turbinate. This is the pterygoid process. So all this anatomy is better seen on axial sections. Like similarly, the infratemporal muscles, if there is some tumor extending towards the infratemporal fossa or behind the maxillary sinus or anywhere posterolaterally, this axial gives a better understanding of the relationship of the tumor and the normal structures. Now similarly, the osteomeatal complex, as I mentioned, the infundibulum is not very clearly seen on coronal sections unless you have a 0.5 mm sections. This axial gives a better picture of this entire osteomeatal complex area. This is the uncinate process. This is bulla ethmoidalis. This is hiatus semilunaris inferioris. This is middle turbinate, and this is where it is leading to the infundibulum. So certain structures are better seen on axial, like this orbit. The entire antero-posterior depth of the orbit, the lamina papyracea in entirety, is best seen on axial sections. Similarly, the septal deviation, again the entire antero-posterior length of the septum can be assessed, and the Onodi cells. You see what the Onodi is actually. One of the posterior ethmoidal cell grows beyond the sphenoid sinus laterally, and then this optic nerve comes to line the relationship of the Onodi rather than the sphenoid. So it can be appreciated well on the axial section. Then the sagittal reconstruction has its significance in certain situations, like knowing the slope of the skull base. You can see the skull base is not a flat horizontal structure. It is sloping, and you need to know before surgery how slopey the skull base is. Otherwise, like if you are introducing your instrument from here, if you don't realize this slope, you can enter accidentally into the cranial cavity. Similarly, the relationship of the sphenoid with the sella is best appreciated on the sagittal reconstruction images, which you can't appreciate on the coronal or axial images. And most importantly, the sagittal reconstruction images gives best information about the frontal recess anatomy. See, there are lots of cells in the frontal recess area, and the relationship of these cells is very, very important to understand to know the frontal recess, actual frontal recess. Like in this picture, you can see this agar-Nagy cell attached anteriorly onto the beak or this process, while this suprabular cell is attached to the posterior part on the skull base, and in between is the frontal recess. If you know this configuration pre-operatively by means of CT scan, you can easily widen the frontal recess by fracturing this agar-Nagy anteriorly and opening the suprabular recess from anterior and widening them, and you can have a full access. So understanding the frontal recess configuration is very important, and the best information is given by the sagittal picture. Again, the ONOD, you can clearly see this posterior ethmoidal cell is growing above and beyond the sphenoid. How no other picture can give this information better than the sagittal reconstruction images. So once you see the CT scan of a patient where you plan some endoscopic sinus surgery, this is the checklist. You need to see these many things in detail to have a complete three-dimensional understanding of each and every cell and their relationship in this paranasal sinus labyrinth. So this is the checklist, and you need to see each and every structure carefully. Now there are some pictures, some other things which you can see on CT scan, like nasolacrimal system. See all the three sections. The coronal section we have seen in the CT scan as well, the nasolacrimal system. You can see on the axial, see at the anteromedial aspect of the maxillary sinus, but the best detail of the nasolacrimal system is given by the sagittal reconstruction images. Your full length of the nasolacrimal duct is seen on sagittal images. So you can make out sometimes if you have any relationship of tumor or something to the nasolacrimal duct, you can make out very well on a sagittal reconstruction. Then the cribiform plate configuration. See, Quiroz has defined the depth of the olfactory fossa in three types, and this is clinical significance. This is type 1. See how shallow is the olfactory fossa. This is the lateral lamella of the cribiform, which is the thinnest part of the skull base. In type 2, the fossa is little deeper than the type 1. It is roughly 4 to 7 millimeter. And see in type 3, how deep is the olfactory fossa. The clinical relevance is, once you are working in the frontal recess area, in this area, to widen the frontal recess, if this olfactory fossa is too deep, if this lateral lamella is too long, there are possibility of injuring this lateral lamella by hitting through some instrument which you are working with. So if this lateral lamella is shallow, you have more space, or you have less area to work for, or less area for instrumentation, so there are less chance of damaging the skull base at this level as compared to a Quiroz type 3. And one should realize pre-operatively, this is mentioned in the checklist. That's why I put up that slide, the checklist. You have to check each and every anatomy. It's not the pathology that has to be looked in CT scan. It's the anatomy which is more important, so that you don't give any complications unknowingly. Now, this configuration sometime may be different on both sides. This side it is very steep and this side is very shallow. Once you are doing any instrumentation in the frontal recess, you need to know all these things. You can see the level may be different. One side the olfactory fossa is more deeper, one side or shallower. Another thing is CSF leak. If you have a thinner section 0.5 to 1 mm, you can follow the CSF leak, and this opacification in continuity with the nasal cavity. This can be picked up with a good CT scan. Skull base we have discussed, we already discussed that the slope of the skull base has to be seen on sagittal scan, and this is very important. Like if you are using a 70-degree telescope, or even with a 0 degree, if you are making an opening in the ground lamella, your angle of instrumentation should be important. It should be horizontal rather than being vertical to hit the ground, the skull base. We have seen the anterior ethmoidal skull base, which is relatively thinner than the posterior ethmoidal skull base. We have already discussed all these things. Anterior ethmoidal artery, again we have already discussed. You can see this canal emerging from the orbit to the lateral lamella, the orbitocranial canal. You can see very well on the coronal scan. Then on the axial, if you have a fine axial sections, you see this orbitocranial canal. This is the orbit here, this is the canal, and here it comes in the olfactory fossa, and then it runs anteriorly along the crista galli to again come back in the nasal cavity. So you can see on the axial pictures very well. Then the postsigmoidal artery, like in the previous CT scan which we saw, you can see a prominent postsigmoidal artery. It's uncommon to see this prominence as the skull base is relatively thicker in this area, and you can see this sigmoidal artery on the postsigmoidal artery on the axial scan as well. Now this picture shows something interesting. We have seen the septal spur can be picked up by means of nasal endoscopy, by means of axial scan, but sagittal scan gives you a better picture of a spur rather than the complete deviation of the septum. Secondly, why I put up this picture is look at the change in the difference in the configuration of both the maxillary sinuses. See, this sinus is hypoplastic, and what happens in this situation, see the difference in the uncinate process on both sides. This is the uncinate process on this side, and this is the uncinate process on this side. This uncinate, because of this hypoplastic maxillary sinus, is very, very close to the orbit. So one has to realize this anatomy preoperatively, as if we use a sickle knife to remove this uncinate process, this lamina being very close to the uncinate can get punctured, or we can have an accidental orbital entry if you don't realize this. So in such situation, it is best to use the reverse biting or a backbiter forceps and remove the uncinate with that forceps rather than using a sickle knife.
Satish,
Yeah.
if possible, use a pointer on your computer.
Hello?
Use a pointer on the computer.
Pointer?
Yeah. Okay, that's better.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Narayan. Okay, I can skip this. Then the osteometal complex we have already discussed. You can see all these things contribute to the osteometal complex. The middle turbinate, medially, uncinate process, bulla ethmoidalis, and infundibulum. This is the complete configuration of the osteometal complex. And you can see, we have seen on the axial scan, this can be picked up clearly, like in this axial scan, the bulla, uncinate, hiatus, and the infundibulum into which the maxillary sinus opens. See, on this coronal, on a perfectly thin slice coronal scan, you can pick up this entire detail of the osteometal complex on the coronal section as well. Now, in all these three sections, if you correlate the infundibulum, see on the coronal it is here, axial it is here, and see the sagittal. It gives a complete full length demonstration of the information of the this infundibulum. So all three dimensions are important, and endoscopically how this infundibulum looks like, one should not get confused with the maxillary sinus ostium. See, this picture is after uncinectomy. The lower part of the uncinate has been removed, and what you see here, this three-dimensional space is infundibulum. The maxillary sinus ostium is lateral to this. So this ostium actually opens in this three-dimensional space, which is infundibulum. So one should not get confused with the maxillary sinus ostium with the infundibulum. Then some variations of the middle turbinate, like we have already seen in the previous CT scan, the pneumatized middle turbinate, concha bullosa. All this Heller cell, concha bullosa, has their significance in compromising the outflow of the maxillary sinus. See, the big concha bullosa obstructing the maxillary sinus outflow. So in any of these situations, if you get concha bullosa, if you get Heller cell like this, you have to treat them accordingly. Like this Heller cell, this is the Heller cell, this is the maxillary sinus. Just simply divide this party wall and communicate this Heller cell with the maxillary sinus. So there are certain ancillary procedures which are to be done with endoscopic sinus surgery to improve the results, like turbinoplasty for the middle turbinate, Heller cell or any other cell, or inferior turbinoplasty if it is obstructing the airway, or if there is septal spur or high deviation. All these things have to be treated simultaneously with the endoscopic sinus surgery procedure. Again, the multiple Heller cell, long flat Heller cell. Then like we discussed the uncinate process, the upper attachment is variable and that dictates the frontal sinus drainage. Like the uncinate here attached to the middle turbinate or the skull base, and the drainage of the frontal sinus in the infundibulum, the common drainage for the frontal and maxillary, which is not seen here if the uncinate is attached to the lamina. Then the drainage is in the middle meatus. Then sometimes the uncinate may be pneumatized. It's very uncommon. Bulla you can pick up very easily on any CT scan. Sinus lateralis is actually, normally the bulla extends up to the skull base and there is no space above the bulla as the bulla directly inserts on the skull base. Sometimes the bulla, this is the bulla, sorry, not bulla, this bulla, this is bulla ethmoidalis, this is not extending up to the skull base, and then there remains the suprabullar space. The only significance of this anatomy is, if the bulla extends up to the skull base, it comes anterior to the anterior ethmoidal artery. It protects the anterior ethmoidal artery. If you do a frontal recess walk while preserving the bulla, you don't damage the anterior ethmoidal artery. In such situation, when the bulla is not extending up to the skull base, then the anterior ethmoidal artery is seen in the suprabullar recess. Then it is exposed in the suprabullar recess, and you have to be careful with your instrumentation so as not to damage the anterior ethmoidal artery. Now, the frontal recess. We have seen the frontal recess, and this anatomy is, this detail is best given by the sagittal reconstruction images. Normally, the drainage of the frontal at the level of the beak is, this opening is hourglass, widened above, widened below, but constriction at the level of the frontal beak, and this is determined by the various cells around. There are groups of cells which are attached to the anterior wall of the frontal sinus to the beak, like the Agar-Nagy cell we have seen, and then the frontal cells or the Kuhn cells. Kuhn cells classified them into type 1, 2, 3, 4 according to their extent into the frontal sinus itself. Then there are groups of cells which are attached on the posterior part of the frontal recess, that is skull base. There are suprabullar cells, frontobular cell or supraorbital cells which obstruct the frontal sinus outflow by from behind. So if we see one by one, Agar-Nagy you can pick up on the most anterior scan. We have seen, we have already discussed. You can skip. Frontal cells which Kuhn has classified into 4 types. The type 1, this is Agar-Nagy. Type 1 is one cell above the Agar-Nagy but below the level of the beak. It's not extending in the frontal sinus. Then type 2, there are tier of cells, maybe 2, 3, 4, whatever number, above the Agar-Nagy but still not extending above the beak. The significance of this classification is, this shows the degree of severity in removal of these cells. Type 1 is easiest to remove. In type 2 there are more cells, you have to go more higher up with your instrument and then fracture them anteriorly. In type 3, the one of the cell extends right up in the frontal sinus, but not above the 50% of the height of the frontal sinus. So again it obstructs the frontal sinus outflow, and in this situation you really have to have long instrument. You have to have a good 70-degree orientation and long instrument to go right up to behind the cell and fracture it out. So it is more difficult than type 2. And type 4 situation, there may be a loner cell in the frontal sinus which is far above or more than the 50% of the height of the frontal sinus. One cell may be extending into the frontal sinus about the 50% of the height, or maybe a loner cell. Either of these is considered as type 4, and this is the most difficult situation. In such situation it is difficult to remove endoscopically without doing something with this frontal beak. If you don't drill this beak out, you can't remove this cell simply. You may have to do sometimes a frontal drill out or draft type 2 or type 3 to remove such large type 4 cells. So all these variations in the frontal recess anatomy can be picked up easily by means of a good CT scan. Then there are group of cells which are attached behind, like this. This is the bulla, this is the suprabullar cell. which is extending right into the frontal sinus, up to the frontal sinus. Sometimes it extends right into the frontal sinus, then it is known as frontal bular cell. Now, why sagittal reconstruction is important? If you don't realize this cell, if you try to go behind this cell, you will have an accidental intracranial entry. You can't go behind this cell as it is attached behind to the skull base. If you realize, if you know this thing on a pre-op sagittal reconstruction image, you have to open this cell from front and widen the frontal sinus outflow. So that's how the sagittal reconstruction is important. Then the supraorbital cell we have already discussed in the previous CT scan. These are the cells behind the sphenoid, frontal sinus, and they extend above the orbit. So in this situation, you may find, once you see through the endoscope, two openings in the frontal recess going deeper. If you find two openings, it is always the anterior and medial opening, which is the frontal sinus. The posterior and lateral one is the supraorbital. And if it is a big one, you just remove the party wall in between these two and widen the frontal sinus drainage. Then the intersinus septal cell. This is basically pneumatization of the intersinus septum, and this further narrows the frontal sinus outflow. The bigger the cell, the more is the blockage, and you can pick up this cell by a pre-op CT scan. This cell drains in either of the frontal sinus. Just simple remove the party wall between the cell and the sinus, like the supraorbital cell, and widen the drainage. Now see the difference. If you have a coronal scan, if you see this kind of a cell in the frontal sinus, this kind of a cell, how can you differentiate whether it is a type 3 cell or a frontal bulla? It's difficult. The only way is, if it is a posterior cell, if it is a posterior section, see this posterior section, you see the maxillary sinus in view. This is far anterior section, you don't see the maxillary sinus in view. So this is the anterior section, means this is a type 3 cell which is attached to the anterior wall, and this is a frontobular cell which is attached to the posterior wall of the frontal recess. But this becomes crystal clear if you have a sagittal reconstruction image. If you have a sagittal reconstruction image, see the type 3 cell attached to the anterior wall, you can actually go behind the cell and remove it anteriorly. Why the frontal bular cell which is attached to the posterior wall, then you have to open the cell from front, you can't go behind. So this is best depicted on sagittal reconstruction images. Then the interlamellar cell, we can skip this.
Hello,
quickly.
Satish?
Yes, dear.
The patient is ready, man. Hello, induced and ready, I think.
Yes, I have asked them to call me once it is ready. I think it is.
Yeah.
कितना टाइम लगेगा?
Ready, मारुति का फोन है इधर से.
Ready? 5 minutes.
हाँ.
5 minutes, Ashish.
Okay, buddy.
So I'll just quickly go through the remaining. I'll take only important scans. Middle turbinate you can skip. This is attachment of the first part of the middle turbinate, second part of the middle turbinate in the coronal fashion, the third part of the middle turbinate is going in the axial fashion. We have already discussed variants. Paradoxical middle turbinate. See, the middle turbinate is turned outside in, and this blocks further narrows the frontal sinus outflow. You have to divide the lamella of the middle turbinate in this situation. Pterygopalatine fossa. See, we have seen on the previous coronal scan the pterygopalatine fossa and how it looks like. Yeah. How it looks like on the coronal scan. This is orbit, and just below the orbit is the pterygopalatine fossa, just posterior superior to the maxillary sinus. See, the best details of the pterygopalatine fossa are given by the axial images. This is pterygopalatine fossa, and this is the crossroad for various structures which pass through this fossa. This the posteriorly is the Vidian canal going to the foramen lacerum here. This is the carotid artery here. So this is the Vidian canal. Laterally the pterygomaxillary fissure. This inferiorly you see in this sagittal image is the greater palatine foramen, greater palatine canal. So it's a crossroad. This is very important to understand this pterygopalatine fossa, as the tumors arising in this pterygopalatine fossa can spread anywhere through all these foramina and canals. Like angiofibroma, if it is in the pterygopalatine fossa, you need to clear carefully the Vidian canal, the pterygomaxillary fissure, the inferior orbital fissure and all, so as not to leave a residual angiofibroma. Like superior turbinate, we have this Onodi cell, though we have not discussed. See, this is the picture of the Onodi cell. This is the on the left side. This is the sphenoid sinus, which is pushed infero-medial, and this is the ethmoidal cell, which is growing above the sphenoid, and this optic nerve is now lying in the lateral wall of the Onodi rather than the lateral wall of the sphenoid. If you don't realize this and go on behind to open the sphenoid without realizing this, you can damage the optic nerve. And on this Onodi cell can be very well picked up by means of a coronal CT scan. See this coronal scan, you see the horizontal septation. This is the septation of the above is the Onodi cell and below is the sphenoid sinus. This is the lateral wall of the anterior wall of the sphenoid, which is pushed below by the Onodi cell, which is seen as the horizontal septa. Sphenoid bone, we have discussed the various relationship of the sphenoid. The greater wing, lesser wing, in between is the superior orbital fissure, above is the optic canal, the carotid artery. See various structures all around the sphenoid bone. This is the over-pneumatized sphenoid. This is what we were discussing, the lateral recess. This is the Vidian canal and this is V2, and in between in this pneumatized pterygoid process is the lateral recess. This is over-pneumatized optico-carotid recess. In this situation, one has to be very careful, as you may find a dehiscent carotid as well as the optic nerve. Then pneumatization may vary in the sphenoid. Pre-cellular, cellular, post-cellular pneumatization. Exposed optic nerve, carotid artery. See the bulging optic nerve in the sphenoid. If you can know this pre-operatively, you can avoid injury to all this. I think the case is ready.
Kuhn is described as an isolated cell inside the frontal sinus. This is isolated cell inside the frontal sinus. Otherwise, any cell like type 3 going above the 50% of the height of the frontal sinus is the type 4 cell. So this is the most difficult one, as with the endoscope you can't access this cell very easily, and sometimes you need to have a long instruments like 120-degree debrider, the other latest gadgets which can take you high up to this, and if you can't, you have to drill the anterior wall of the frontal sinus, or you may have to do a modified latrops, or sometimes an open approach to remove this cell completely, because unless this cell is not removed completely, there will be obstruction behind and persistent sinusitis. So this is type 4 cell. Now these were the anterior group of cells occupying the anterior part. Now the another group is the cells occupying the posterior part from behind and obliterating the frontal sinus outflow. Out of them, the simplest is the suprabular cell. We know the bulla is most of the time attached to the skull base. Sometimes bulla doesn't extend to the skull base, and there are a number of cells above it which compromise the posterior part of the frontal sinus drainage. Sometimes it's big and completely blocks the frontal sinus. So now the difference, unlike to the frontal cells, they are attached behind to the posterior wall. This is skull base, behind is the cranium. You can't go behind the cell. If you try to go behind, you'll enter the intracranial cavity. So this fact should be very, very clearly understood by means of a sagittal CT scan, that where the cell is attached, and one should not attempt going behind this cell, otherwise we may have an accidental intracranial entry. So to remove this cells, the anterior wall has to be punctured and cells should be removed in a piecemeal manner to remove it completely. Like this cell, you can't go behind it. You have to open the anterior wall and remove the cell completely to clear the frontal recess. So this, whether it is a frontal cell or a suprabular cell, it is best understood by the sagittal section of CT scan. That's why the three-dimensional CT is imperative for a proper endoscopic sinus surgery procedure. Now, if what happens, this suprabular cell, if happens to extend inside the frontal sinus, further obliterating the outflow of the frontal recess, this becomes more difficult now. It's going high up, and again we have to understand this is attached to the posterior wall. We don't need to go behind, and we have to open the anterior wall and remove it completely to accomplish the frontal recess drainage. So this should be understood by the CT scan. So this is the frontal bular cell. The frontal bular cell extending inside the frontal sinus attached to the posterior wall, unlike the frontal cells which are attached to the anterior wall. Now another is a supraorbital cell. This is a very common entity. What happens? This is not unlike the supraorbital cell. This cell is more anterior towards the just behind the frontal sinus opening, and further this cell pneumatizes the upper part of the orbit and compromise the frontal sinus opening. We'll see a case today with the supraorbital cell. This compromises the frontal sinus outflow by occupying the anterior part of the frontal sinus, and you can see on the CT scan how this compromises the frontal sinus. So this look on endoscopic picture, how does it look like? When you see the frontal sinus opening, you will see the two openings. So whenever there are two openings or any doubt of the frontal sinus, you have two guides. Number one, whichever is the medial opening is the true frontal sinus, and second is you palpate the beak of the frontal bone, and just underneath the beak, whichever cell is just underneath the beak is the frontal sinus. We'll see in the live surgical session. So this is the supraorbital cell, looks like in a sagittal section and a coronal section. See the lateral cell, see this is the frontal sinus normal on the other side. This is the frontal sinus blocked laterally and posteriorly by the supraorbital cell, looking bigger than the frontal sinus proper. Another is the intersinus septal cell. See what happens. If you see this coronal picture, this line diagram, the frontal recess, opposite frontal recess would be here, and the medial part of the frontal recess drainage is occupied by a cell, that is intersinus septal cell, occupies the medial drainage of the frontal sinus. This cell opens in either of the frontal sinus, whichever, and see this is the intersinus cell. This is opening into this sinus and blocking the outflow of this sinus like this, and we need to understand and communicate this to the corresponding frontal sinus for a proper drainage of the frontal recess. Now see the difference what we have discussed on the same coronal scan. This is the cell, what it can be, and this is a cell, what it can. These are two different cells, and you can't differentiate on a coronal scan 100%. To understand this fact, you can't differentiate whether it is an anterior group of cell or a posterior group of cell. So to understand this fact, if we have a sagittal reconstruction, see this is attached to the anterior wall, so it is a Kuhn type 3 cell, and this cell is attached to the posterior wall, so it's a frontobular cell. This is how the coronal CT is important to differentiate. Now, most important landmark you see in every endoscopic sinus surgery procedure is, which comes across you all the time, is the middle turbinate. Middle turbinate is a constant landmark and very important in the sense, see the middle turbinate, you can see on the any coronal CT scan, it has three portions, the first, second, third, we'll see, and it divides, the second part divides the anterior from the posterior ethmoidal cells, and the way the middle turbinate is attached in 3 dimensions, it gives stability to this ethmoidal labyrinth. We'll see. See, the first part of the middle turbinate, what we see, this is the first part, this is attached in a sagittal plane. See the 3 parts. The first part, it is attached in a sagittal plane above, anteriorly, it is attached to the frontonasal process of the maxilla, and posteriorly it goes high up and attached to the junction of the lateral and medial lamella of the cribriform. This is a very, very important bit we need to understand, as this middle part of the middle turbinate should be handled with caution. Any forceful manipulation to this portion of the middle turbinate can give rise to a distant CSF leak at the level of the cribriform plate. The second part of the middle turbinate lies in a coronal plane, and it goes laterally and attached to the lamina papyracea, known as basal lamella or ground lamella. On the third part of the middle turbinate, part behind, we'll see, goes behind and attached to the perpendicular plate of the palatine bone. So, and that lies in an axial portion. So this middle turbinate is a 3-dimensional structure. See now on CT scan one by one. The first part of the middle turbinate attached to the cribriform, the lateral lamella and medial lamella attached to the junction of the lateral and medial lamella. The second part, see how it is turning to get attached laterally to the lamina papyracea and divides anterior. These are the anterior ethmoidal cells anterior to it, and are the posterior ethmoidal cell posterior and superior to it. And this is the third part of the middle turbinate attached to the perpendicular plate of the palatine bone. in the posteriormost part in the roof of the choana. So this is the third part of the middle turbinate lying in the axial plane. So sometimes it may has also have variations like paradoxically bent. See, the middle turbinate is generally bent like this. This is paradoxically bent, and this situation compromises the osteomeatal area and can give rise to further sinusitis, and this has to be corrected by a lamellar resection. We'll see. This is the paradoxically bent. Sometimes it's not the turbinate itself, but the lamella of the turbinate is pneumatized and can give rise to blockage of the airflow to the other sinuses. This is known as interlamellar cell of Grunewald. This is the pneumatization of the lamella of the middle turbinate, not the proper middle turbinate, which is known as concha bullosa. So, after the middle turbinate, the next structure behind is the superior turbinate. We can appreciate this is the posterior ethmoid area. See how the shape of the size of the orbit, the bigger cells. This is the superior turbinate, and how it is attached superiorly. It is attached superiorly to the roof of the posterior ethmoid. See how thick is the roof of the posterior ethmoid. Even if you handle this middle turbinate, cut or remove or pull it, it's not going to give any problem at the skull base. The skull base here is very, very thick as compared to the anterior ethmoidal skull base. And this is a very, very important landmark we'll see in the live surgical session to approach the sphenoid sinus ostium. If the moment you enter the posterior ethmoid, it is the middle turbinate, the superior turbinate, which is a medial boundary of the posterior ethmoid. Posterior ethmoid is again like a box, bounded laterally by the lamina papyracea, and medially all the way from anterior to posterior, medial limit is the superior turbinate. So, moment you reach the enter the posterior ethmoid through the gown lamella, find the superior turbinate and stay medial to it. Stay medial to it in the front sphenoethmoidal recess, which will directly lead to the sphenoid sinus. This is the safest way to enter the sphenoid sinus, which we'll see in the live surgical session. Now, coming to skull base, we see how the slope of the skull base is from anterior to posterior. It slopes down by say 15-20 degree angle sometimes, and the component of the skull base are ethmoidal roof or the fovea ethmoidalis. We have a picture, we'll discuss that. And the anterior part of the skull is formed by the anterior ethmoidal skull base, and the posterior is the posterior ethmoidal skull base. We have seen the anterior ethmoidal skull base, how thin it is. See the anterior ethmoidal skull base, how thin it is. The crista galli, the medial lamella of the cribriform, the lateral lamella. See this lateral lamella, it is thickened laterally. This roof, this thick bone laterally overlying this ethmoidal cell is the fovea ethmoidalis. See, we'll see in the picture, the uppermost ethmoidal cells are open and they are roofed by the frontal bone, which is a thicker bone. This is the frontal bone, thicker bone. This is roofing the uppermost ethmoidal air cells known as fovea ethmoidalis. So this is the anterior part of the skull base, very thin, and this is the posterior part of the skull base, comparatively very thick. And if we see this cribriform plates, there are various variety of cribriform plates you come across, and Quiroz is divided according to the complicacy involved with the cribriform plates. Like the simplest one, why complicacy, I'll come on to that. Very shallow olfactory fossa, you see, very shallow, less than 3 millimeter. So in this situation, if you work laterally in the frontal recess, there are less chances of coming in contact and hitting the lateral lamella of the cribriform. The lateral lamella is very small. This is the thinnest part of the skull base, the lateral lamella, particularly where the anterior ethmoidal artery perforates, 0.05 mm. So this lateral lamella has to be cautiously dealt with as you work in the frontal recess area. If your instruments hit the lateral lamella, you can get a CSF leak. And this is a very thin lamella covered by a single layer of dura inside. Even a slightest hit to the lateral lamella will give a CSF leak. So, Quiro is divided into the shallow part, the type 1, where the lateral lamella is very small and less chances of hitting it. If it is deeper, more steep, if you are working in this area, you have more chances to hit the lateral lamella. This is type 2. And type 3, see, you are working all the way here, you have a thin lamella medially, and there are more chances of hitting the lateral lamella, and this is Quiroz type 3, and you have to be very, very cautious operating such cases. Sometimes the configuration may vary, they may be more flattened, more steep. Sometimes given unequal on both sides, how this lateral lamella is, how this lateral lamella is, unequal level of the olfactory fossa. You can get any kind of situation, and you need to be aware during, get yourself acquainted before surgery with a CT scan. And this coronal section gives the better picture of this anterethmoidal skull base. Now, this is fovea, what I was coming on to it. See the ethmoidal, this is ethmoidal bone. The ethmoidal bone consists of this perpendicular plate of the ethmoid forming the nasal septum in the midline. Number of tier of cells, we see the ethmoidal cells, and laterally is the lamina papyracea. So the uppermost group of cells, you see this uppermost group of cells are open, and they are roofed by the, this is the frontal bone, above by the frontal bone. So the roof of these uppermost cells is formed by the frontal bone known as fovea ethmoidalis. And there is the orbit. Just I'm not going into the detail. We have a case, live surgical, we'll discuss, but some points to discuss. The details of the orbit is best appreciated on an axial CT scan. That's the important thing I wanted to mention. You can see the medial rectus muscle, lateral rectus muscle, the optic nerve, and the important fact, the entire length of the lamina papyracea can be appreciated in detail with this axial sections. And see this important fact, anteriorly, this anterior posterior, this is the medial rectus, lamina papyracea, and there is a pad of fat in between. So whenever you cross the limit, the lamina papyracea anteriorly, you come across the fat. That's a warning sign that you have entered the orbit. But this warning sign is lost behind, and the moment you damage the lamina papyracea, you are in contact with the medial rectus muscle. So you have to be cautious about, while working in the posterior ethmoid, not to damage the lamina papyracea, as there is no pad of fat behind to protect you from hitting the medial rectus muscle. Now, one important thing discussed many a time as a matter of fear or concern for every endoscopic sinus surgeon is anterior ethmoidal artery. It's always a big fear. So what exactly is this and what is the fear? See, this artery can be appreciated very well in all the section, the axial, coronal, sagittal, but you should have a thin 0.5 mm section. And the typical location of this artery, see, this exits the orbit like a nipple, known as Kennedy's nipple. So it leaves the orbit in a canal, in a bony canal, and the typical site of leaving or exiting the orbit is this is the medial rectus muscle, and this is the superior oblique muscle, and this leaves the orbit exactly at the confluence of the medial rectus and the superior oblique muscle to enter the paranasal sinuses in the roof of the anterior ethmoid. This is not always, sometimes it is hidden underneath the thick bone, sometimes very, very prominent. Whenever the skull base is more pneumatized, the chances of this artery running in the mesentery without the covering of the bone are very high. So this leaves the orbit, and typically at the junction of the ethmoidal bone and the frontal bone. So once it leaves the orbit, it runs in the canal in the roof of the anterior ethmoid, we always see during sinus surgery, and this leaves the roof of the ethmoid to enter the lateral lamella of the cribriform plate. See the lateral lamella, to enter the olfactory fossa of the brain. So since it is a branch of ophthalmic artery, so it leaves the orbit. First part is intraorbital, then the sinus part through the paranasal sinuses, then the intracranial portion, it enters the cranium, then in the olfactory fossa it runs anteriorly in the sulcus, known as ethmoidal sulcus, and again comes back in the nasal cavity. See how many compartments it crosses during its course. So orbit, paranasal sinuses, intracranial, then comes in the anterior superior part of the nose again to supply the anterior superior part of the nasal cavity, and then leave the nasal cavity and come out to the dorsum of the nose underneath the nasal bones, and comes out onto the dorsal surface between the nasal bone and the upper lateral cartilage. So this is the entire course of this artery, and we need to understand this to understand the complications involved with the damage to the anterior ethmoidal artery. So you can appreciate this artery very well like a canal leaving the orbit. This is the sinuses entering the fossa, and on an axial CT scan very well you can appreciate this, the crista galli. It leaves the orbit, enters the olfactory fossa, and then run anteriorly here. moving. The screen is moving. And you can see even on a sagittal reconstruction picture, the anterior ethmoidal artery, though not very clear, but in coronal very clear. Similarly, the posterior ethmoidal artery, you don't generally appreciate the posterior ethmoidal artery very clear, as the posterior ethmoidal skull base is very, very thick. But yes, on 0.5 mm section, and sometimes when it is very prominent, or in the rare situation in mesentery, you can appreciate this, like leaving the orbit and entering the cranial cavity. This is the posterior ethmoidal artery. The only concern with this artery, I think Dr. Haldipur is going to discuss in detail in the coming lecture about the bleeding in the arteries. He has some interesting videos of the bleeding in ethmoidal arteries he's going to show. Now, going further behind is the sphenoid sinus. See how complicated this sphenoid sinus is, or the sphenoid bone is. The sphenoid sinus is nowadays the gateway to the endonasal skull base surgery. This is the gateway. All the anterior skull base approaches are through the sphenoid sinus. So this sinus is required to be perfectly understood, the anatomy and its relationship. Dr. Pankaj Gupta is our guest today. He's a neurosurgeon. He has come. He is with us now. So we have a lot of skull base cases and neurosurgeon with us, and I hope he is going to have the tough time. Number of questions today in the live surgical session. So this is the sphenoid sinus. If we see the anatomy, this is the proper sphenoid bone with the sinus inside. It has two wings, the greater wings, the lesser wing. Two processes. These are the pterygoid processes with two plates, the medial and lateral pterygoid plates. This is the entire sphenoid bone. And see the intricate anatomy of the sphenoid. Inside the sphenoid sinus, you have a carotid artery running in the lateral wall, the optic nerve running in the posterior superior wall, greater wing, lesser wing, through which is the superior orbital fissure, which leads to exit the second, third, fourth, sixth, V1, V2, all the nerves, and the median nerve running in the floor of the sphenoid sinus, and the optic nerve running in the medial part of the orbital, superior orbital fissure with the ophthalmic artery. So this is all important structures, all the tigers hidden and passing through the sphenoid bone. So we need to understand this anatomy in detail and be aware of by imaging, by CT scan or MRI, while going to the any endonasal skull base procedure. If you see the sphenoid sinus and our coronal CT, see this is the prominence of the carotid artery here. This in the floor is the opening of the median nerve. Here, this is the lateral recess. This is the median nerve. This is the V2, the maxillary nerve, the foramen rotundum. Carotid artery is the clinoid process, the pneumatize. This is the optic nerve in the superior part. So, carotid artery here, optic nerve here, and there are many times anatomical variations, sometimes dehiscent, exposed, bulging, so many. So we need to understand before any skull base procedure this anatomy, and there could be many anatomical variations like pneumatization. Sometimes it is so less pneumatized, sometimes even less than this, like a pit. This is known as conchal variety. Sometimes it is moderately pneumatized, and see in the less pneumatized, the sella is far behind, and to approach the sella you really have to drill a lot of bone. Sometimes it is approaching the pneumatization, approaching up to the sella, known as sellar variety. This is conchal variety, sellar variety, and sometimes fully pneumatized and sella bulging into the roof of the sphenoid sinus. This is the most favorable one for the skull base approaches. The moment you enter the sphenoid, the sella is directly in your approach. So this is important to understand in skull base approaches. Like if you have a skull base case, the pituitary, meningioma, or craniopharyngioma, or further intracranial posterior fossa tumor, if the sphenoid is not pneumatized, the case is not a suitable case for the endonasal approach, and this has to be approached by some transcranial approach. Another variation, sometimes the sinus is too pneumatized. So the surrounding all structures we have seen in this line diagram are now in the walls of the sphenoid sinus. So all may be dehiscent, and you have to be more careful then. Like the median nerve, maxillary artery, the carotid may be dehiscent, the optic nerve may be dehiscent. This is the median nerve, the V2, and see the carotid and the optic nerve. Sometimes in variations, like the optic nerve dehiscence. You see the right optic nerve is dehiscent. There is no bony covering over it here. So we need to understand in a pre-op CT scan. So while working inside the sphenoid sinus, to be careful not to use any sharp instrument, debrider or sharp through-cut forceps, because it may be dehiscent sometimes. Like this, the optic nerve is bulging inside the sphenoid. D. Lange's devised the classification of the optic nerve running inside the relation to the sphenoid sinus. Type 1, according to D. Lange, is the optic nerve deep in the wall of the sphenoid sinus without any major prominence even. You can just appreciate the optic nerve running with no prominence. Type 2 is optic nerve very prominent in the sphenoid sinus. You can make it mark. And type 3 is optic nerve is literally bulging in the sphenoid sinus, and we have to understand this fact. What is Onodi cell? This is the picture from the Stemberger's book, the Onodi cell. Onodi is the situation like, see, there are many lamellas in the lateral nasal wall. The anterior wall, the uncinate process, then the bulla, then the basal lamella. Anterior to basal lamella is the anterior ethmoidal cell, behind to basal lamella is posterior ethmoidal cells, and behind the posterior ethmoidal cells is supposed to be the sphenoid sinus. And so, to open the sphenoid sinus, you have to go behind the posterior ethmoidal cell. Or sometimes, if one of the posterior ethmoidal cell grows behind and superior to it, beyond the sphenoid sinus even, like this optic nerve, which is supposed to lie in the lateral wall of the sphenoid, comes to lie in the lateral wall of this posterior ethmoidal cell, and this is the real danger if you don't appreciate it beforehand. And this situation where the optic nerve is coming to lie in the lateral wall of this cell is the Onodi cell. So we have to be careful in this situation. The moment you enter the posterior ethmoid, don't think of going through the posterior ethmoid into the sphenoid. The moment you enter the posterior ethmoid, stay medially and enter the sphenoid through the sphenoethmoidal. This is Onodi situation. You see, this is the sphenoid sinus, and see the behind the sphenoid is a cell, this posterior ethmoidal cell, and through which the optic nerve is passing. This is the Onodi nerve. So optic nerve is in the lateral wall of the posterior ethmoidal cell. So this is Onodi situation. You can appreciate in all the sections, like on axial section, if you find a horizontal septa in axial section, this is diagnostic of Onodi. It's very, very simple. This is sphenoid sinuses proper, and this above cell going beyond the sphenoid over it. So this is producing a horizontal septa on a coronal section. So this is Onodi cell. So once it is, the optic nerve is going to come in contact with the Onodi. And you can see on a sagittal section, this cell is going beyond the sphenoids, beyond the sphenoid sinus. So this is Onodi situation. In axial also, the cell going behind. And now another thing is carotid artery. You can see on the axial section, sometimes the carotid is deep buried in the bone and you can't see the prominence even. Sometimes it is producing a prominence in the posterolateral wall, and sometimes you can see the exposed carotid artery, the dehiscent carotid artery bulging inside the sphenoid sinus, and this is a real danger situation. You need to understand on a pre-op CT scan. This is a rare situation but not uncommon. In less than 3% situation, you can see the internal carotid artery dehiscent in the sphenoid sinus, and knowing this fact, one should never ever use any sharp instruments inside the sphenoid sinus. According to Stemberger, the treatment of sinus disease is establishing ventilation and drainage. For the sphenoid sinus is same. Open the sphenoid sinus, widen the ostium, don't do anything inside besides suction. If you have anything, polyp or disease or anything, you should know the anatomy very well beforehand, and you need to know what exactly you are doing with what instruments. Sometimes the septa are not equally dividing the sphenoid sinus, and one of the septa may be going to the carotid artery. And this is a very important situation. Again, the clinical relevance is this septa should not be handled forcefully. If this septa needs to be removed, it should be dealt with a sharp cutting, through cutting instrument rather than pulling with the forceps, as may lead to tear in the carotid artery. So, knowing the Onodi cell and the posterior, the superior turbinate, many approaches to the sphenoid are defined. The standard transnasal, the straight one, go medial to the middle turbinate, above the choana, and you can approach the sphenoid. Then the lateral one is through the posterior ethmoidal cell, then to the sphenoid, and the most favorable nowadays is intermediate, is the superior turbinate. Stay medial to the superior turbinate, within the superior turbinate and the septum, and you can easily access the sphenoid without any damage, or if there is, even if there is ONOD, there is no fear. You can't damage it if you stay medial to the superior turbinate. And another thing in the sphenoid sinus is the inferior part. There's a part of the sphenopalatine artery, the posterior wall branch of the sphenopalatine, known as nasoseptal branch, runs in the floor of the sphenoid sinus. If you widen it too much inferiorly, you may damage this branch and come across the bleeding. So it's not a concern, you can cauterize it and deal with it. But this is a very important branch for a Haddad flap. Two Argentinian surgeons have devised the flap, which has now become a workhorse for the skull base reconstruction. Any kind of skull base defect, we have repaired up to 7 centimeter skull base defect through and through from anterior ethmoid to sphenoid very well with the vascularized nasal septal flap. Entire nasal septum mucoperiosteum on one side can be elevated based on this artery behind, known as Haddad flap, and this vascularized flap can be placed for any skull base defect. So this, like PMMC as a workhorse for head and neck surgery, the nasal septal or the Haddad flap is a workhorse for skull base reconstruction. So now I think we're coming to the end. Lastly, you can see on the axial section, and the axial sections behind, as we have seen, the superior orbital fissure, and just one section above is the optic foramen. You can see the anatomy here and the relationship of the dizzy to these structures. And in short, the nasolacrimal system, see, on a coronal section we have seen earlier, on the anterior most picture where you see the agar-Nagy cell, you can see the nasolacrimal sac and the duct. This is the anterior most, as this is the pneumatization of the agar lacrimal cells. So this nasolacrimal system, if you see, starts with the canaliculi, common canaliculi, and the sac and the nasolacrimal duct. This has 13 valves in the entire system. All these are named by the different surgeons. Many of them, I don't know the entire 13. Common, we know the valve of Hessner, valve of Boschler, valve of Pohl, valve of Rosenmuller, valve of Telfer, and all. So many valves in this system. And if we see this video,